Hello and welcome to the GrowCFO Show. My name's Kevin Appleby, and today I've got Tony Talbot with me. Now, Tony is also a podcast host. Tony produces a podcast called Career Move Secrets. So welcome to the show, Tony.
Hi, Kevin. Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
So, Tony, what's Career Move Secrets all about?
So, Career Move Secrets is a multiple of things, if you like. I have a podcast, as you say, which I think I'm up to about 35 episodes on, maybe 36. I also have a course for executive level job seekers. So it's predominantly helping those sort of senior, sort of C-suite or moving into the C-suite type candidates make that next career move to the next level. So career move as a sort of definition is to make an upward move, if you like, a move better than the one that you have right now. So and the secrets are all about the strategies that I think you need in today's job market to get you to the next level, particularly when you're actually looking for a job, which I find a lot of the senior people I deal with, they don't have that experience anymore, because there's so many people like me out there as headhunters who are headhunting them. You often move because opportunity comes your way, but when you're actually looking to make a move to the next level, that's when you actually have to think about how you're going to execute that.
And no, Tony, we've spoken in the past, not just about Career Move Secrets, but about the secret job market.
Yes.
And that's one thing that I really wanted to talk to you about today and find out what exactly that secret job market's all about.
Yeah, well, the term I would use is the hidden job market. And the hidden job market is a term used to describe jobs that are not advertised or posted online or anywhere else. And actually, it's thought to be 80% of the jobs that are filled each year are unadvertised. So if you think about the way that people think about job seeking now, since the sort of digital age of job boards and seeing, enormous amounts of jobs online, I think people think the way to find a job these days when they're actually looking is to go online, to use Indeed or LinkedIn or any other job board and look for what's out there. My argument is, well, it's very easy, and you can get a cross section of jobs there, and you can very easily apply. You can just click and apply, and it's all very, very easy. But actually, that market is only 20% of the market, and it's also a market that I think is almost broken. But it's almost a victim of its own success. I was talking on my podcast with a CEO of a lady called JC Townend, and she's the CEO of a company called LHH, Lee Hecht Harrison. They're a talent management company. She was telling me, so she's in my space, if you like. She was telling me that one of her clients is a bank, and they get, for every job they post, they get 5,000 applications.
Ooh, 5,000 applications. So you're one of 5,000 CVs hitting,
which is just ridiculous. So that what they're trying to do is reduce the number. They're trying to up the quality and reduce the number by having all sorts of different tests they put you through before you can even apply. And you can imagine how that's sort of replicated across markets. The average, actually, so let me give you the figures. The average across the entire internet is each job that you see posted attracts 250 CVs. That's the average.
Okay.
And the average number of people called forward to interviews is 2% of the actual people that apply. So quick maths there says, you need to be in the top 5 people to get an interview. And so that's why I think that job market is broken. It can be very, it can be very disconcerting for people applying to jobs and finding that they're not getting any traction. You're not getting any feedback. You really feel like you're throwing your CV into a black hole, and that's pretty much what is happening. The other thing that's going on is about 75% of the companies out there are now using some degree of software to look at your CV. We call it an applicant tracking system. So they're looking at the keyword richness of your CV. So if you don't have an appreciation of how to write a CV in the digital age, then you can find that your CV never actually sees the light of day, doesn't actually get in front of an actual human being. It will be ruled out by the applicant tracking software, and will end up in some sort of digital bin. So the job market can seem like there's lots and lots of jobs out there and it's all very easy, just click and apply. But in reality, you're looking at 20% of the market. You have to be in the top 2% of people to get an interview. And beyond that, I'd also argue there are more problems in so much as that's not how recruitment works. You know, having been a headhunter for 20 years, I can tell you that's not how it works. Advertising, it lags behind other more productive methods of recruiting. You know, writing a job spec, writing a job ad is something that takes time. And it's something that lags well behind the real things that are happening. Think of it this way: if you have an opening in your business, if you've got a gap, or you can see a gap coming around, or you're hit between the eyes with that day with a resignation, your first thing is not to write an advert. Your first thing is to think, who do I know?
Yes.
Or who do we know in our network that could do this job? So you do that sort of, let's try and build our own shortlist from people that we know, like, and trust already. That's your go-to. If you don't get any joy, or even if you're doing that in parallel, you'll probably speak to somebody like me, a headhunter. And bearing in mind, we're always speaking to CEOs and other C-suite people constantly and asking them a question, you know, what are they looking for today? They're likely to get somebody that will ask them that question within the space of a few weeks, and they might outline a job spec to them. And when I say a job spec, we're talking about bullet points here. It won't be a job spec. It's, in my experience, it's a bullet point of 2 or 3 things that you must have in order to meet the role. So, you know, must have worked in this industry, must have this qualification, must have exposure to whatever it might be, multi-site business, or a business that's going through change, or a business that's preparing for sale. You know, it'll be these sorts of things that has this person, you know, done an IPO before, whatever it will be. It will be a small number of things, and we run off with that and try and create a shortlist. And it's only really through that process that the job becomes more defined. I actually find that my clients become more defined in what they're looking for by meeting people. So they interview 3-4 people, and it starts to develop a more formal brief, because they say, well, you know, that guy had this, that lady had this ability. What I'd really like is somebody that's got all that combined. That becomes the job spec that you're looking for. And often jobs are just filled before they even reach that advertised state, before HR get involved. I find hiring managers, as opposed to HR, they just want to get things done. And, you know, the wheels of HR are not sort of brought into action unless really, sometimes you can even argue, and a lot of the CEOs I've spoken to on my podcast have argued the same, that, you know, the job advert is a bit of a safety net. It's a bit of a...
I must admit that I'm a cynic when it comes to HR departments, that I think the activities done by an HR department are normally to give the HR department jobs.
I have some sympathy with you there.
I look at that across recruitment, and my least favorite HR activity, the annual appraisal.
Yeah, they're not often recruitment experts. I mean, to be fair, now more often big companies have internal recruitment teams, and, you know, they do a job of recruitment. But I find if you're talking about senior roles, they don't touch the senior roles, because if you think of it, if you're a CEO, you want to take ownership of your C-suite team.
Absolutely.
You don't want to, you're not palming that off to somebody else. You're thinking of it from your own point of view, your own network. Who do I want, and how do I want to bring them into the company? So
if you're the CEO, you want people that you really can work with on a day-to-day basis. And I think particularly the CFO, because the CFO often ends up being the CEO's right-hand man. And there's something that it's as much about skills as it's about chemistry.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why meetings take place. You know, that's why it's the interview process that really determines who gets the job. It is that chemistry. It's being able to see eye to eye and realize that you can work together.
Yeah. And I guess that first bit about who do we know, who's in our network? Well, across the C-suite, you will know quite a number of other senior people, maybe already in the C-suite or ready to make that jump.
Absolutely. And you should network with them. Again, I was talking on my podcast with a guy called Mel Karam. He's the CEO of Bristol Water. And he was talking to me endlessly about, leveraging your network for information. He talks constantly to people in his network. And it's the way he has, found his senior roles. And he's worked at a partner level at KPMG and other places. But by talking to people and being aware of what they're doing in their businesses and the direction of travel, this is how you can yourself become aware of the hidden job market and the opportunities therein.
So the flip side of that then is to CFOs looking for new role, or heads of finance, financial controllers, etc., looking for that step up to the C-suite, has to be leverage your own network in the same way as the CEO would do. So who you're connected to is enormously important.
Absolutely. And it was actually, I did a webinar for a company called Gated Talent recently, which is a sort of group of exec level candidates across the world. Actually, they're all mostly in the sort of C-suite, and many of them are in that sort of finance function. And we were talking about, which I know you share an interest in, the idea of sort of personal branding and this type of thing. I was talking to them about how you can become more visible and valuable in the hidden job market by raising your profile a bit. And you can do that within your narrow network, your real network, if you like, the people that you genuinely know and have worked with in the past. And you should keep in regular contact with them and certainly shake the trees a bit and find out what's happening. But you can also do a sort of broader piece to a more digital network, if you like, through LinkedIn. You and I both sort of advocates of LinkedIn, where you can, I guess, raise your profile by being more active, make sure that you have a very full profile, that you use your entire word count throughout your profile, that you talk about your successes and your experiences. Because actually, when I say that people like me are headhunting, one of the go-to resources for us is LinkedIn, and it's where you can self publicize your experience and abilities. So if you have a nice full profile that becomes much more searchable, there's more chance that I will find you, and I might reach out to you for an opportunity in the hidden job market, a role that's not being advertised anywhere. So that's something that you should do as well.
Take me a little deeper into that. You're sitting there as a headhunter. You've got this half dozen bullet points that have come through from a client. You're now going to start making your list. Talk me through that process of using LinkedIn and so on to start to identify potential people for your shortlist.
Yes, good question. That is essentially what we do. If you think about LinkedIn now is 700 million people who are essentially creating the biggest ever recruitment database going. In the old days, each recruitment company had its own database, and that was limited by the people that you came across. The LinkedIn is 700 million worldwide. In terms of the people on LinkedIn, I think it's nearly sort of 50% or more that are earning over $75,000. So it's actually the people that are in my target market, the more senior people. And actually, it's thought that all of the most important decision makers are on LinkedIn. So you've got a network there of all the people that you want to be involved with and that you want to target. For somebody like me as a recruiter, I pay much more for my license than you would for yours. You might be a normal user getting it for free. I'm paying a premium to be able to see the entire network. So I don't just see my connections or even my third connections. I see everybody that's on there. So I use that as a tool to with my bullet points to do my very first quick reference check on how big the talent pool might be against those bullet points and perhaps a location. So I might look at CFOs in, let's say, London or commutable to London, who, let's say my client was an FMCG company, and they said, people need to have FMCG experience to take this job. You can start to see how I can build a pool there of potential people to target.
Now, my experience of LinkedIn, and we do a little bit of that sort of thing when we're trying to publicize GrowCFO. probably not quite as filtered as you, because we wouldn't filter by industry, but certainly I've done searches and I've said, tell me anybody with the job title head of finance there, because recognizing that the step up for most heads of finance will be the CFO, therefore ideal potential people to start talking to about our future CFO program. But that still comes back in Sales Navigator in LinkedIn with huge numbers of people in lists. So I imagine that even after putting those criteria into, you've still got a big chunk of people there.
Yeah, and that's why we would, use all 4 bullet points. We would, everything that the client is after, if you layer them up, and this is how we do it with Boolean searching. So you will say, and or, and these sorts of things. So if you're basically, when you start to add 4 pieces of information together that they must have, your talent pool will become smaller and smaller. Agreed. It can be massive, and I don't want to work on a talent pool that's sort of, I don't want to work on in the hundreds. I want it to be sort of 50 to 75 is probably the range that I would want to be working with. So we'll tend to narrow it down to that, and that's why I guess when you think about search and what we're being asked to do as headhunters, a company can find somebody that's a 70% match. They might be able to find somebody that's 75% match. What they're asking of the recruiter, who they're paying a fee, maybe 25%, even 30% of the first year salary of the person that we hire, they're asking us to find a 95% fit. Yeah. So that's how our talent pool becomes much, much smaller. So, we have to really hit the nail on the head. And that can become a list of, say, as I say, 50 to 75. We then, really look at that list of people. And when you think about then what we're looking for, if we were to do this all through LinkedIn, it's not by any means that we do it all through LinkedIn. We don't. There's other channels, but I think, a lot of that will be asking people that we know and using our network. But if you look at it just from the point of view of LinkedIn, it's a good example of why your profile needs to be a valuable profile, because I'm making a value judgment when I look at your profile as to whether you're the right person for this job. If you haven't bothered to update your profile in 3-4 years, my value judgment is going to be lacking, because I'm not working with the great information. That's why I would say, make sure that if you're interested in hearing about opportunities that fit you, self-publish what you're about and what your capabilities are. And by doing that, you're going to attract the roles that suit you better.
So how would you go about self-publishing those capabilities? And I can think straight away of that block at the top of your profile in LinkedIn, that sort of free-form text to describe yourself.
Yes,
think of
the about. Yeah, they've changed that from summary, haven't they, to about you as a title. But thinking of real estate on LinkedIn, the most valuable real estate is your profile, your headline, as we call it. So instead of just putting, here's an example. So let's say you are a head of finance, and that's your title. You would add more to that. So you have a character limit of 200 for your title. So you need to use all of it. And we've all seen people, and mine's no different, where you're using every one of those characters. So for instance, if you were a head of finance, let's use our FMCG example, you might have a hyphen or something like that, FMCG hyphen, you might even put CFO delegate or something like that. If you were in line for that next move, you might add to that some of your key experience. So that might be that you have you've been involved in private equity businesses, or you've been involved in all the sorts of things that you think we might be searching for. If they appear in your headline, that real estate in your headline is the most valuable. It's the thing that comes up in searches as the most important. So that's your prime real estate. And if you have something in there that leads to who you are and what you're about, that's the best thing to do.
You and I in business, where we're running our own organizations, I've often been told for that kind of type of market, you go for a headline that goes something like, I help target customer achieve great success, whatever that is, in limited time period. a kind of formula for putting that headline together.
Yes, and that's very much a marketing piece for when people get eyes on your profile. I think that's right, and in many ways, mine's a bit like that. If I was in a role working for a large organization and I was, looking to be found on LinkedIn, I think I would have my real title, and then I would have hyphenated or in some way sort of a number of the key capabilities that I've got in there. So that might be, as I say, might be market sector, it might be the type, the level that you're at, it might be some of the experience that you've had, whether that's, as I say, being involved in acquisitions or doing due diligence or disposals or whatever it is that is sort of a significant part of your role, because we'll be, whether it's been managing treasury or whatever it is, if we're searching for somebody that has those key criteria and those key capabilities, if it's in your headline, you'll appear higher up the list.
Yeah.
That's
I guess that about you paragraph then goes into more detail.
It does, and that's your next most important bit, and you've got 2,000 characters there. So you've got an opportunity to tell a story, which is important, but you've also got an opportunity to load up the keywords so that your profile is keyword rich. And then you have that opportunity in every role you have fulfilled. You've got 2,000 more characters to use. So I would say, use them. So if you've had 5 roles, and even if they've been very similar, don't worry about that. I think some people go, this role was the same as the previous one. Write it out in full detail again, because that will help you in your keyword richness. You'll go higher up the chain. If you, for instance, let's say you've done a head of finance role 6 times, and you've got 6 head of finance roles in your LinkedIn profile, you're more likely to appear in a head of finance search on LinkedIn by a recruiter than somebody who's had one of those roles.
Okay, so you're recruiting somebody for a client, Tony, who you're looking for a CFO. Possibly you're looking for either somebody who's done the role before, is really ready to step up to the role. Typically, what sort of keywords will you be putting into that search? Are there some that come up more than others?
Yeah, I think you would always look for all the different terms that could be used. So, different companies have different terminology. Head of finance is one. Finance director might be another. There might be, junior, a CFO, delegate type role. There might be some people using VP finance. So you probably actually use as many of those as you possibly can to give yourself a bigger spread. And then you're using other words or groups of words tagged on that are allowing you to shorten the field a little bit. So at the start, you're looking to see how big the market is, and then you're narrowing the market with the other bullet points or key points that key criteria that your client is asking you to recruit against. And then, that's just the first sift, if you like. After that, you're doing the due diligence and you're doing the real human aspect of making value judgments on somebody's profile, or indeed on the companies that they've worked for, and you're using your market knowledge. It moves away from it just being about, data to actually value driven recruitment that each recruiter has. So, we all know a lot about the market. We know, we know the reputation of one company versus another. We know the culture of, or we've interviewed enough people to know the culture of one business against another. So you start to make value judgments about, is somebody who has worked for, PwC a better fit, when they were in their sort of audit part of their career, a better fit than somebody who was at Deloitte. You start to make lots of different judgments like that based on what you think is best fit for your client. So there is an element of this sort of at this high end level of or sort of helicopter level of, you need to have keyword richness in there, but you also need to have a great profile that people can read and understand and take a judgment on.
So there is a little element of cognitive bias coming in there. You're associating a certain type of person with, say, a Deloitte. The person you're looking at in front of you might have worked for PwC, but you don't know that they might have been more of a Deloitte sort of person in actual practice. bias.
Yeah, there's no doubt there's a cognitive bias in virtually every decision a human being makes, and there's no doubt that there's an element of that in recruitment as well. I think if you really know your client, you have a view as to what works with them, and ultimately what we'd want to do is speak to a person and get a view as to who they are. And that's the sort of the method. We always want to meet people as recruiters, because that's where you gain the most information. But at that sort of long list level, yeah, you probably do have to make a number of different value judgments, which are based on some bias or some view that you have, or indeed that your client has.
Now, you mentioned earlier that you'd probably start discounting somebody who hasn't updated their profile for 3 or 4 years, but that's not the only place you can be active on LinkedIn. You can post on LinkedIn, you can comment against things other people,
and that would all
the active part of groups. To what extent do you look at that kind of thing, Tony?
Certainly you would look at groups for sure. And, I think one of the things that I might look for, knowing, about GrowCFO, is that if I thought somebody was in your group, I'd think, well, there you go. There's somebody who's showing some ambition to get to the next level. Particularly, let's say if my brief was about finding somebody who can step up into somebody who's sort of young and ambitious and wants that move from number 2 to number 1. Then I would certainly look at, say, GrowCFO as a, who's in that group. And I might look at other groups. So it can be not just a source of who's in the group, but a source of information for me if I'm also in the group or become a member of the group, to ask some questions, to ask who people know, to ask some information about the marketplace. So certainly we use that part of the LinkedIn network as well. And then we get more granular. We start to speak to individuals and follow different trails that lead us hopefully to a decent group of people that we can put through a process, and ultimately a shortlist that we can put in front of the client.
So typically when you start talking to people, how many people would be on that shortlist? Is that when you've got it down to 10, or is it a bigger number than that?
It could be a bigger number than that, yeah. I would say 25 to 30. Right. So I would try and make sure that I'm doing a very thorough job. So if I might start with a long list of 75 to 50, something in that region, I would hope to speak to sort of, let's say the long list is 50, I'd hope to speak to about 25. But of course, I'm headhunting people. So how many of those people are going to react positively to my headhunt? It's not going to be all of them. That's for sure. So you start to have a conversation with those that have been receptive to your approach, and then you're making really a deeper relationship with these people and trying to work out whether they're a great fit. And then you go through the process of meeting them and eventually putting people forward.
And I guess you're already whittling that list down a little bit to people that are more likely to respond by saying, well, okay, I'm really not going to have anybody who's already moved jobs in the last 12 months.
Yes. Yeah. That's one of the things for sure that we would, when you're looking at that big group of people, you're making those sorts of judgment calls. You're thinking, right, that person's only moved 6 months ago, so they're not a great fit. You might even go the other way as well. So if somebody's been in a business for 12 years, you might argue, well, they're not necessarily a person that has been particularly active in the job market. And what's the reason behind that? Maybe they're not the sort of person that wants to make a move, because you only have a certain, a number of hours in the day, and indeed sort of credits in the bank in terms of making approaches. You can only do so much. So you do make these calls. This person's not likely to be receptive because I think, for one reason or another, either they've just moved or they've barely ever moved. You're probably looking for that person who has, had a good exposure in each of the roles, 4 or 5 years, but you don't want them to be sort of moving every year, and you don't want them to be never moving.
Gosh, when you really take the lid off this, it becomes a fascinating area. And when you're in the application or the search process for a new job, you always think about it from your own point of view. Just hearing that switched around and hearing it from the headhunter's point of view, I think is absolutely fascinating to understand the process that's actually going on there.
Yeah.
I suppose another stat, Tony, we talked about 20% of jobs are advertised, 80% are hidden. Then we talked that some jobs are filled just through the network. Others are filled by headhunters like yourself. What's that split in percentage terms?
The biggest biggest area or group that are filling roles is through referrals. 40%. So 40% of jobs are filled through referrals, and even the likes of LinkedIn sort of back that up. And if you think about LinkedIn, it's not necessarily all about referrals. They've got a job board, so they've no reason to say that. But it's also thought that's the highest quality hire is often made through referrals. Job boards only makes up 15. It's actually 14.9%. So 15% of people find their job through job boards. This is market wide. I would suggest that that's weighted towards the more junior end of the market, and referrals is more the sort of towards the senior end. And then search headhunters, we also operate at that more senior end of the market. So, if you're a senior person, you're much more likely to find your job through referral from somebody else or from getting headhunted. I don't think you're not as likely to find your job these days through applying to an advert, for the reasons I've already argued. That actually, if you think about even jobs that make it to being advertised, they're almost already filled. Maybe 3 slots out of a 4-slot shortlist have been filled through referrals and a headhunter. You're really sort of up against it, which is why you want to get into opportunities at their outset. I would always say, don't be scared of having conversations with recruiters, or indeed with companies where there isn't a job spec. In fact, you should be very pleased if they say, we haven't got anything written down at this point in time. Because my view, and this is borne out by my 20 years in recruitment, is you have much more of an opportunity to get the role built around you if they haven't already decided to the nth degree of what they're looking for. If you've got more of an opportunity to project your skills and experience as being the sort of de facto that they should want, than when they really get granular on what they're after, you've got more of a chance of getting in and making an impression, having a relationship, which is what you need to have with a decision maker. So I would always be very keen, if I heard of an opportunity, to get in at the early stage and be one of the first to be interviewed rather than be one of the last.
In some ways, I don't think that's changed an awful lot over the many years. And I'm sort of at the twilight end of a career now, working in GrowCFO. But over that sort of, I got the first job in 1982 when I graduated. Now, over that period of what is now coming up on 40 years, I've only applied for a job or got a job through the application process twice. I qualified with BDO Binder Hamlin, and I applied to join ICI and got that job through application. Years later, the business I was with in ICI had been taken over by BASF. It was clear there wasn't a job. I saw Coopers & Lybrand advertising extensively for management consultants. Actually, it was through their own in-house recruitment practice, but applied for that and got it. But that, in 1997, was actually the last time I applied for a job.
And that's not an unfamiliar story to me. Again, on the podcast, I ask everybody about their career moves, and admittedly, the people I'm interviewing are either CEOs or they're very experienced and sort of at mid-career at the very least, and senior. But I've been surprised that almost all of them have had a very similar story. At the early stage of their career, just out of university, they made an application, and ever since they've moved through what I would call the hidden job market. Whether they understood that was what it was or not.
I left university and moved through the hidden job market because I decided I was going to be a chartered accountant. Dad was already a chartered accountant in practice. I said, right, Kevin, the last place you're going to work is my office. That's not going to happen. But hey, if you want to qualify, here are these 3 partners in other organizations in Newcastle. I can introduce you to them if you want and see where it goes.
Yeah, that's how most people, I think, migrate from one job to another. I spoke to a lady who was CEO of Birmingham Highways, and she thought she'd applied to one job in her career. And when we spoke about it in great detail, she hadn't even applied to that one. I'd found her a job at one point, and she thought that was an application. It wasn't. It was me headhunting her. So she'd never applied to a job and has made it to CEO level. I suspect that's it's part of how you know. If you want to have great success, you need to be in this hidden job market. One of the other reasons I'd say so is partly because of the fact it's less competitive. You know, if you think about being involved in a situation where there's at least 250 CVs come in, if you're involved in the hidden job market, you're in a situation where you're one of a handful, or maybe two hands that have been in conversation about the role. So you're being handpicked, but you're in a much less competitive environment as well. You've got to be a particular type of profile to get into that early conversation, but being in it, you have a much better chance of actually landing the role.
Yeah, I'm reflecting on Son Benjamin as well, who's recently left Deloitte and taken on a senior transformation role in Vodafone. And I know that he never applied for any jobs to leave Deloitte, but over a period of the last couple of years, probably approached by 3 or 4 headhunters. Some have gone further than others, and there's been the regular conversation of, Dad, I've had this conversation, I've even had this interview. What do you think?
Yeah, and that's how it happens. In fact, even the sort of accountancy firms themselves, I find they fill lots and lots of CFO roles, as you probably know, and finance director roles, often with their own people, because they are in conversation with a company. It becomes obvious that a vacancy in the finance function has come around. It's a natural thing for the CEO to or another senior person to ask their auditor, "Who do you know?" Because you're one of my other financial advisors. Who do you know? And they facilitate this a lot of the time, whether it's somebody that's in their business who's not on the partner track, but is rated as a good person and has an ambition to go industry side, or whether it's somebody else that they know through their network that they know will be friendly to the firm. They're very happy to make those introductions and put those people forward. And that I suspect that's a more a more fruitful avenue for finding your next job than, as I say, applying to the broadsheets. I mean, 20 years ago, it was you picked up the FT or the Times or the Telegraph on a Thursday, and all the jobs were there. That's how it worked, but it doesn't work like that anymore.
That was definitely during my period around the mid 90s of thinking, no, my business in ICI has been sold to BASF. I've got to get out of here. Standard reading was Thursday morning's Financial Times.
Yeah, and that's how it worked. And to be fair, in those days, I recall when I used to put sort of front page adverts in more often for me, it was a Telegraph and the Times, but you would get 200 CVs come through the post, and you had to open them all, and you end up with a big pile. And it was all about selection then. So it was about active job seekers putting themselves forward by applying to a job, and you sifted through it. These days, and actually, probably early in the 2000s, it became all about search and probably more now about network and your wider network through LinkedIn, where actually passive candidates, i.e. those that are not necessarily looking for a job, or are being spoken to about roles. We want to look at the entire market as a headhunter. We don't just go after those that are active. So through your career, you should get tapped up, frankly, a number of times. And if you're not getting tapped up, then I would suggest that you're not promoting yourself enough on LinkedIn. You don't have a full enough profile, and you're not being visible enough in your career. And you need to, as you say, maybe join GrowCFO or be involved in more groups or be more active in your industry forums for people like me to be able to find you, because they're the sort of methods that we use. And you need to be speaking to your network more regularly to find out what do they know and who are they speaking to, and find the recruiters in your sector that are leading the way, and build relationships with those people, because having a pet recruiter to work with over a number of years can be a real shot in the arm for your career. It can be incredibly advantageous, and is a relationship that I would suggest you should develop.
And you like that as well, because the person you place, Tony, suddenly becomes, in that job you've placed them in, probably becomes one of your clients to recruit other people.
Absolutely. Bit of circular economy, and that's exactly how it all works. So, you need to build these relationships. That's what I would always say. Build these relationships, build your network. That's where the value is. Use your network to sort of winkle out opportunities, to find out about companies, to do your due diligence when it comes time to making decisions, to find or even vet candidates that are going to come and work for you. It's so important to have a network these days. It's something that you really need to invest in your time and your effort.
So, to conclude, the hidden job market is something that you as the future CFO really need to know about. And I'd say if you want to find out more about this, there's some good listening. And please don't stop listening to the GrowCFO Show. But I could thoroughly recommend Tony's podcast, Career Move Secrets, which is on all of the major podcast networks and at careermovesecrets.com. And it's a really good listen once a week.
Yeah, excellent. And please do come and have a listen. You could also go to my site, as Kevin said, careermovesecrets.com. I actually have on there a free masterclass about the hidden job market. So that's a sort of video-based presentation, which will go into more detail than we have done today. I also have another one that will, if you are making job applications in the way that I'm sort of suggesting is difficult, why not up your chances there by taking my applicant tracking system beating resume masterclass, which basically I'll help you again through a piece of free training, put together your resume or CV in the best possible way so that it does get past the applicant tracking system, so you end up in the top 20%, and actually gives you more of a chance of your CV being seen by a real human being. So there are two free resources on there that I would really advocate you take advantage of.
I guess that CV, Tony, I know we're closing down the conversation here, but that does raise another question. CV, obviously key document if you're going against advertised jobs, but I guess that CV is still important, even when you're going through a network or through a headhunter like yourself, because that's the piece of paper that the guy who's actually recruiting the job is going to read before he interviews you, while he's determining who's on that final shortlist for interview.
Absolutely, and if you don't have a CV up and ready, then you're not in the market at all. You're restricted from the market. If I headhunt you tomorrow, the first thing I'll ask for is your CV. That's the sort of collateral, if you like, or the currency of the recruitment market. So you need to have one. In that training, I explain how you put a CV together properly, because my God, I've seen, you can imagine 20 years in recruitment, I've seen every different format and font and everything. And most of them are wrong. Frankly, there's a very simple process. You don't need to hire an expensive CV writer. You just need to follow the formula that I set out there. You need to understand, that you have at the top of your CV an opportunity to say something more about yourself, and put your case forward. And I've got a bit of a formula for that. And then there's a particular way you set out your CV, which I advocate, which works both for an applicant tracking system, but it also works really, really well for a human being to read. Somebody like me who wants to read your CV very quickly, because when I say read, nobody reads a CV, they skim read. And the format that I've set up is one that is skim readable to a very, very high level.
I'm thinking, I haven't done any recruiting for a while, and the last times that I've done this, it's mostly been involved in the graduate recruitment schemes. But you'll pick a CV up possibly 10 minutes before you're due to interview somebody, and you want to know the basics about that person before they sit down in front of you. So it's very important to have that in an easily readable format. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so important, and
I
a lot
guess
of people get it wrong.
I guess we could record a whole other podcast on how to write a CV, but
I'm sure we could.
I think before we get into the down a rabbit hole and talk about that a lot more, I think we probably ought to draw this to a close, Tony. So thank you very much for being a guest on the GrowCFO Show today.
Thank you for having me on, Kevin. Really enjoyed it. Brilliant.
And if you want to find out more about potentially becoming a CFO, come along to growcfo.net and find out all about the future CFO program that we offer. We'd love to have a chat with you about it. Okay, thank you.